All right. I think I'm live. Welcome back. Yesterday, we were working on a item system. I'll show here where we have slot-based inventory with different items in our bag, and we worked on creating a stacking feature. We can stack our items, we can swap our items, and if I give myself a new bag, we can move them between different items or different bags. And this is again working on a server, and this is a client. I can open up two different clients here. That show you that working. Same idea. Give myself another bag. If I go back to this other client here, combine everything, and we have separate items. So stacking's working, our inventory is working. What I want to work on today is trying to fix our items so we can use our items again. I have a Hearthstone in here. This is this rock, and it used to be able to actually teleport our player, but it's been broken, so I want to start working on that today. And I'll show you. For those that have not joined the stream before, show you the mural I have set up. You can kind of learn about what I'm working on, what I'm doing. But basically, I'm just trying to recreate parts of World of Warcraft in Unreal Engine. I'll post a link here. And currently what I'm working on is a player inventory, replicated player inventory, and items. And then the drag and drop inventory UI. These are pretty much done. I've done some other stuff. I've worked on the zone manager, which I talked about before, which some of that design is here. Like I said, today I'm working on the item system and trying to finish building out items and making them usable. So what I want to do is talk about the design. I'll do that down here. Basically, I have a player inventory system set up as an actor component. So I have my player state class that then has a actor component, which is my player inventory. And in my player inventory, then I have a whole bunch of functions. And so today I want to make a server function that is going to be for on use. So we have a whole bunch of different types of server functions right now. We have like server, move item, server, add item, and these work for managing our inventory. But now we want to add a new one, which is going to be server use item. Oh, I'm glad you think it's educational. Yeah, so I want to make a server use item function that will take in a integer for the bag slot index and then another integer for the item slot index. This way on the server, the client will call that, and this way the server can validate if the item is valid, if it exists in the player's inventory, and then can check to see if the player is actually eligible based on the player state to actually use that item. And then once we do that, once this function figures all that out, it can then it can then create or call a client RPC to update the client that says, hey, you can actually use this item, play this sound effect, play this effect, that sort of thing. So inside Unreal Engine, I have an item set up. I'll show that before we dive into trying to get it to work again. I have a Hearthstone item that has a on-use ability, which is a gameplay ability, part of gameplay ability system using gas. And if I open that up, we can see some of what it's doing. There's going to be some rework in here, mainly because it's tied to the player state and just was one of the first abilities I created in this project, so it needs some rework. But basically, once we activate the ability, we commit it. It starts a casting timer. I think I set this to like 3 seconds. So all my abilities have ability data structure. It has a name, has a damage range if it's possible, an icon, if it should be shown in the spell book or not, if it requires a target or not, a bunch of range information, cost information, tons of things in here I can go through in another video if people are interested. I have cooldown tags, custom gameplay tags, all this set up so that this Hearthstone works. And basically, the way this works, when this Hearthstone is used, then it sets a cooldown. It uses the global cooldown, which is set to 1.5 seconds, but it also uses its own cooldown for the Hearthstone in general. So that means it can have each player will have a gameplay tag associated with the spells, and as long as that tag is up, that means it's on cooldown. It can't be used again. But we have the item, we want to use it, and right now we cannot use it anymore. So if I go back and press play, let me make sure we're just on one client to make it more simple. Press play, nothing happens when I click on this. It's completely dead. So what we want to do is add the server function, and then we want to look at making use of calling the function when we click on the item with our right mouse button, and then we'll start looking at how we can implement the gameplay ability through code. So let's jump into Rider, where I'm working on the different abilities. Here's my base item. We don't have really any functions in here to do any on-use stuff, so we'll have to add that. But let's start in our player inventory component. Again, this is an actor component attached to my player state actor. And I'm going to scroll down here underneath my server functions. And we can now move. So underneath the server move item, we're going to copy the ufunction server reliable blueprint callable macro. And we're going to create a new function called server use item. Again, this is going to take an int32 bag slot index, and then another int32 of item slot index. I'll hit Alt Enter, create a definition for it in our CPP file. And in here, we want to again validate the indexes, validate the item. So we want to make sure the indexes are valid. We want to make sure that the item is valid. So this means that our player still has the item. And then we would need to check to see if the player can use the item. And then we want to actually use the item. So a bunch of things that we need to do, but we can do these step by step. So the first thing we want to do is check to see if the indexes are valid. So what I'd like to do is say if the, I think called all bags, what I called bag inventory. Already forgot. Bag slots. So we'll say bag slots. Bag slots is valid index, or is valid index of the bag slot that we're doing. I'll zoom in a little bit. So if that's not valid, or actually we'll just check that first. So if that's not valid, we'll do an early return. Bag index is not valid. If it is valid, then we want to check to see if the item index is valid for that bag. So what we can do is say bag slots of our item slot index, excuse me, bag slot index, inventory is valid. You know, I can just check to see if the item is valid and not all these checks. Might be better. This might be too much of a check, but it's fine. So basically, if this is true, that means that this index is not valid. We're not going to be able to return an item. This might be useless. I might just be able to say, hey, check to see if the item exists. So I can do, at this point, if the bag slot's valid, we could just go ahead and do the u bag item. Bag item is going to be equal to bag slots of this index. This. And then I can just check to see if this bag is valid. Make sure we have a valid bag. If we do have a valid bag, I think I'm going to do this instead. So if we have a valid bag, then we want to go ahead and get the u item. And item to use. And I know I'm all over the place here, but kind of just code in on the fly. I haven't totally thought through how I want all this to work. But we'll get our item to use, so now we know that our bag item is valid. So we'll say bag item gets item at index. Get item at index, and we're going to pass in the item slot index. Then we can see if this is actually valid or not. So if item to use is invalid, again, we'll return here. And we can add some warnings and things in here. But basically, each of these early returns is something is failing along the way. So the index we provided isn't valid for the bag. The bag item itself does not exist, or in this case, the item does not exist. It's null. All of these things are checks we want to make sure before we attempt to use the item. And again, we can add some log statements to make that more clear for us. So I'll go ahead down and copy that. We'll just say bag slot index is not valid. Copy this again. Bag is not valid. And then we'll say item not valid. All right, so now that we have it, the item is valid. We can then check to see if the player can use the item, which we don't have really any way to do that yet. Besides saying if we have our item to use, we can just check to see if it has on use. So if our item has on use, then we can go ahead and use it. Here, though, this is where we would add some like actual validations, which maybe we'll get into. I'm thinking what we'll do is we'll have a function that takes in our player state, which our player state has a bunch of things on it. Let me pull that up. I can show you. The idea with the player state is the player state's replicated, and it has a whole bunch of components on it for the player that kind of dictate or describe the player's behavior. So I have an ability system component, which is part of the gameplay ability system. It has all of our player abilities, so our auto attack, our firebolt, whatever. The spellbook component is going to go away. I have an equipment component, which is just the actual, like, what equipment does this player have equipped. Currency component, this is just what currencies do we have. So in this component, I've implemented gold, silver, and copper so far, but it's extendable so we can add any types of like tokens or different things that are like in World of Warcraft as you collect like dungeon badges and that sort of thing. And then experience leveling component. This is a component I've reused a few times. I can walk through that in another video too if people are interested, but basically this one allows me to create experience curves through a function or through a graph or through a table. And this just keeps track of our experience, our level. And then the player inventory, which is the one that we're working on. So the player state has a lot. It's replicated by default, which is nice in Unreal Engine. And it's really our owning actor for all the things that we're doing here, required for replication as part of our items. But back to this. Again, we might create a validation. Can the player use the item? Maybe I'll just make a note here. Can the player use the item? And we'll say like a to-do function to add that takes player state. And the things that we might want to check there are going to be our player's level, player's reputation, anything kind of like that. All right, so now we're at the point where we can use the item, and now we want to use the item. And we need to think about how we can do that. I'm going to add a log statement in this that says log item is valid and can be used. And I'm going to restart or rebuild my project, and we're going to take a look at, while it's doing that in the background, we're going to look at our base item class. So our base item class, or U item, is a U object. It is partially replicated. Some things are replicated, so like the quantity is replicated, some of the asset information is replicated. And originally, I think I was going to do this through an item interface. So if I open up this declaration of my item interface, I think I have a use item that takes in the player state. I don't know if this interface is required anymore. I feel like we can just have a function inside this that is just on use. I might keep it for now though. So we'll keep it for now, it doesn't hurt. But what we can do over here in our component. So just to show you, okay, so our item has on use. What this is checking to see is if our item asset has a on use ability. If it's the on use ability is not null, then we know that this item is usable. There could be a lot more information in here. We could put our validation check in here, but this is our simple check for now. What we might want to do here is, if the item is on use, we can then check to see if it implements the interface. So we'll say if item to use implements our U item interface. That's true. Then we can say I item interface ::execute use item. And you can see here it takes a U object, it takes and then the player state. So we want to use it on the item to use. And then we need to pass in our player state, which is our get owner. And I believe we need a cast get owner. So do a ns player state. This is my custom player state class. We'll call it player state is equal to get owner, cast. Let me make sure, cast a ns player states, pass and get owner. If this is valid and we implement this interface, then we'll go ahead and execute this interface with player state. All right. So let me actually rebuild this one more time, take us back into the project. And we should be able to call this when we hook up our right mouse button when we click on the item. All right, so we're back in the project. Let's go ahead and open up our inventory. So here we're going to be in the bag inventory slot item widget, and we have a on mouse button up an event. We can break this mouse event. So I think this was just right. This is just left click for now. I think this registers just left click. So we might want to look into doing this with right click. But at any rate, we can go to our components, grab our inventory component. Delete this comment. Grab our inventory component. And here we should be able to say server on use item. We want to do it here. We want is pressed is going to be for dragging. I wrote this a while ago, so I'm a little confused. But we'll grab our bag index. We'll grab our inventory slot index, drag those to the spot where they need to be. Let's play a sound. Let's see if we can see this working. Or here, if we can see it working. We'll play like... Okay. Let's do this. Pull down a bit, press play, and open my bag, and we'll click. Okay. Do it this way. Okay. So in the log here, we can see item is valid and can be used. So we're making it all the way down to here, and presumably we are calling use item. We can go inside our base item CPP file, and we can look at the on use implementation. So here, I'm going to copy this statement, and what we'll say is item used by player, and we'll come in and we'll add some more information just so that we can see it in the log and kind of prove to ourselves or prove to myself that it's working as intended. We'll say get item name. I think we want to say toString because it's an F text, and then we want to say player state dot get name to already F string. So in here, inside our item on use, this is being called on the server. So I think we can get access to our gameplay ability system component. And with access to the gameplay system component, we should be able to get the ability. So let's say get the gameplay ability from our item asset, which is a primary data asset. Check if it's valid. And then using our ability system component, we can grant and use the ability one time. And I think because this is happening all on the server, we shouldn't have an issue there. But we'll have to double check that. But that's ideally what I want to do is when the item's being used, we want to grab the gameplay ability system from our player state. We then want to get the gameplay ability from this primary data asset, which is loaded in memory and on the server already, and then we can check to see if it's valid. So make sure that the gameplay ability, in this case the GA underscore Hearthstone, is valid. If that's valid, then we can use the ability system component and grant and use the ability one time. And I know as soon as I do all this, we'll probably run into some errors because I don't think my ability system component is set up properly fully for replication. So that might be the next step that we but let's go ahead and grab a few things. So we know we have our item asset. Inside that, we know we have a ability on use. Where's that located? So I restructured a lot of the items, so maybe I am correct on that, but Definitely on the asset. Let me go back. Yeah, it's an item detail. I was trying to do a few things. I need to clean this up. So actually, I consolidated and duplicated some information, and this does not need to be in there. To do clean up structure. Do all right, but back in our base item for now, we can work around it. We'll say item details dot. Is it not in there? I don't remember where I put this item definition. It's been too long. Huh. Okay. I have some inheritance here that I forgot about. So we need to be looking at the item asset, which I think that my item class. This is my base item. So I used to have an item system for something else I created, and I kind of stemmed everything from that base item asset, and then extended that and added more specific things like item rarity, type, equipment type, things that would be more specific to this project. And I kind of forgot I did that, but that's where this gameplay ability is stored. So if we go to our base item and we look at the has on use function, has on use, we are casting our item asset to our, which is a base item asset. So I kind of want to copy this and come back to our on use. So we're going to cast our current item asset to the, which is a base item asset. You can see here to just U item asset, which I know is really confusing, but we can clean that up later. If this is valid, then we want to make sure that on use is not null. Item asset instance dot unusability is null. To make sure that's not true. If it's not null, then we want to go ahead and get our player using our player state. We want to say player state dot get ability system component. I think we want to say this is going to return. You can see here a U ability system component. So we say U ability system component pointer ASC is equal to it, and then say ASC dot the, it's like grant. Yeah, give ability and activate once. So here you can see it takes an ability spec and then some gameplay event data, which we can just pass in as null, which we'll have to add. So what's interesting here is if like we require a target and a whole bunch of other things, we're gonna have to think through how we can pass all this information down. But in this case, it's just a Hearthstone. I think this will work. So the on-use ability is interesting because this is actually it doesn't have a spec. So we can't just pass in the class. Like if I try to grab this instance of it, that won't work. I need to quickly look up how we make a gameplay ability spec. Check. All right. I remember doing this before. I think. Problem is, done a lot of this before and then kind of went back on a lot of stuff here. Here we go. Attempts to activate the given ability. Yeah, I don't think that's right because we need to grant the ability. We need to give it to them. Hey, yeah, so in the course, I want to set up a couple things. For the course, I'm going to talk through setting up a base item and that base item asset. What I'd like to do is, let's just start out as a side project that I was working on the side to kind of learn multiplayer and replication stuff. But I think definitely for the course, I'm going to talk through why we create an item asset, why we create a U object for an item, and talk through how you manage like items as like in a game in itself. So we'll start from the creation. What I want to do is pull it up. I want to talk through just kind of how I do these diagrams. I want to talk through like the basics of, okay, so to build an item system, we need to start with a base item, and the item has this information. Well, how can we do that in Unreal and in a way that's scalable? So then, well, in the course, I'm going to talk about creating a primary data asset. I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of using the asset management system versus building a data table for items. The biggest one being, especially in a project like this, is that I like my items having an instance, so like they have state associated with them, and managing state in a structure loaded from a table is challenging. So I figured we can just load the data asset and then load it into a U object. So I'm going to talk about that, and you'll see that whole creation process. The plan for the course right now is I'm finishing up the interactions module, and I'm curious what y'all's opinions are. I wanted to release just smaller courses instead of one massive one, just so I can get them out faster because I feel like a lot of people are interested. But the thought was I'll do an interactions course first. That will go out, and then I'll make another one that's focused on items and inventory, and that will go out. I'm trying to debate whether I build the first inventory system, like a course just on single player, or if the course is multiplayer. That's what I'm trying to figure out. But for sure, to answer your question, I'm sorry I'm long-winded, but for sure, I want to start to show you the basics of how we create a base item. Really, though, this live streaming, this is just me playing around, kind of just programming, having fun, and learning about multiplayer more. All right. So hopefully that answers your question. Oh, okay. So I can just create an ability spec. So what I can do, F ability spec. No, it's all good. No way that's actually. Oh, you're good. I don't mind answering questions. Please feel free. Yeah, this doesn't seem. Yeah. Yeah, right here. Version that takes an ability CDO. This exists for backwards compatibility. So, plus I feel like this would be if I don't, never mind. I was gonna say this would be boring if this was like the course. Of course it would be though, it wouldn't be helpful. In the world. See what happens. So one bad thing I'm doing here is I am in my data asset, which is something I also want to talk about in the course. I'm using a soft class pointer here, which isn't really loaded, and so I think this will crash. But we'll check it out. So I'm gonna actually load this in here, and we'll do a statement attempting to use ability, and close it up. All right, let's rebuild. Let's test this out. See what I have. It works. Okay, but you agree that probably a smaller course might be more manageable than just a massive course with the 10 sections I listed? I want to build all those, but my thought is it's easier for me to develop, let's say, 10 separate courses that are all 5-6 hours long versus one massive 50+ hour course. I feel like then for you, if you're not interested in, yeah, okay. Because that my other thought was too is like if you're not interested in a leveling system, you really just want to know how an inventory system's built, then you can just use that one and not have to work through all the others. See where we're at. All right. Okay, so the ability was granted. Perfect. But we can't activate the ability. Okay, so this is an issue I need to work on with my ability system. So I had the same dream idea as you. I want to learn C++ and Unreal because I want to have a starting zone. Oh wow, that's cool. I'm glad I can help you out. Yeah, I picked this project that I thought it would be fun. I mean, I had a lot of fun playing WoW back in the day. So initially this started out as a single player thing. And then I was like, well, that's kind of boring. But also, making it multiplayer just adds so much more work in something I had never done. So basically, this all started out as a very small, like, single player project, which I think if I go into standalone, some of the stuff will work still. Or I like customize my abilities. And I started like implementing some auto attack stuff. I had like damage set up. Which was cool, but I wanted to I wanted to support like multiplayer for a few people. So like let's say like a party, so like 5 people and nothing more than that. Otherwise I feel like it's just overwhelming and it'd be too difficult. But anyway, so like this project right now, I'm kind of porting everything over to a multiplayer setup. Uh, but yeah, I'm glad you're interested. Hopefully, I can help. I'm planning on live streaming every once in a while, probably like once a week, just as I work on the content. But yeah, please feel free to ask questions as I do stuff. I'll show you the gameplay ability stuff because that's where we're at now. I'll show you what I've created. Because I think you should if you're going to try to do something like this, you should definitely look into the gameplay ability system if you haven't already. Gas. It's pretty powerful. But Gas is built on, it's a built-in framework for Unreal, and it's all built on a ability system component, which you can go into the depths of and see all sorts of information on it. Yeah, I think, yeah, like supporting 5 people, like if I could get this into a playable state where I can invite some of y'all to come jump in and play, I think that would be fun. But anything more than that, I don't care to like take on. I think it would be impossible to do alone. But yeah, so I have a custom implemented ability system component. I'm not doing anything too crazy inside this component. I'm listening to a bunch of events so I can then fire my own events off. So if I go into that, I'm just listening to different things that are happening internally on the ability system component, and then broadcasting different events. And I did this because I created my own custom gameplay ability instance I can show. And funny enough, I wasn't going to include any of the ability system stuff in the course just because I haven't learned that all yet. But I'd like to do that eventually once I kind of nail down some of the abilities here. I'd like to make that into a course as well. If you're interested in that, please let me know. Let me pull up the ability itself. So yeah, so I created a gameplay ability that implements or inherits from the base gameplay ability. This is where I have all the ability data, which is the structure of just like what is it, what is its name, does it interrupt an auto attack, canceling information, cooldown information, and then a bunch of events of when it's activated, when it's canceled, if it's been successfully used. And I've kind of implemented a whole bunch of custom logic in these different functions. And then I started looking at targeting. Do we have line of sight? Is the target in front of me? That sort of stuff. So if I open that up, we could take a look at it. So one of the first things I wanted to add was like a global cooldown for my ability. So I doing that through a abilities global cooldown tag. And I just check the ability data structure to see if it uses the global cooldown. If it does, let me add this tag to it. That means I can have a global cooldown on some abilities and some, and then not have it on others. Yeah, so built everything on top of gas. So I just kind of extended gas for what I needed. So in this example, like when I activate abilities, built into gas, you don't have like if an ability requires a target. So it's like sometimes you have, like in World of Warcraft, if you want to auto attack something, you need to have a target. Whether you're in range or not, you should have a target selected. And built fundamentally into gas, you don't have that. So like I check to see in that case, do we have a target? And I check to see if we have a valid target, if it's something that I can actually do damage against. And if we don't, then we kind of end our ability. So these custom checks, you have to then customize gas to add. But once you get the hang of it, it's not too intense. So here I check to see if we have a valid target. Check to see if the target's in range. There are some issues in here, like it's not running every tick. But the functionality is there. I can kind of extend it. We check to see if the target's in front. Check to see if we have line of sight. There's a bunch of just checks in here to ensure that I actually can use the ability. And then some things can be auto interrupted, or some things can be interrupted, some cannot. So I do like a check in here for that. And gameplay events. So yeah, there's definitely some customization. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Just extended for the WoW stuff. And it definitely can be cleaned up. Again, this is just me playing around in it. But I think where I'm at now is here we had one of the warnings that went through was the ability was granted, but we can't use it. So if I press play again, we can see the abilities granted, which is great. But because I think my ability system component stuff is set up in, I don't think I have it set up for replication yet. So in my player state, I think is where we do that. And forgive me, it's been a while since I set some of this up, so I might need to do some reading. And I can actually, there's a really good link if you're trying to learn about gas. I can send you. It's like the Bible for it. If you want to learn more about gas, super helpful documentation. Still hard to implement. But definitely useful resource. Okay. So there's a setting in here for gas. It basically sets it up for replication. So here I have, okay. So I create the ability system component. I am setting it to replicate, and replication mode is full, which is good. But I don't think I'm granting the abilities correctly. Uh, Next, let me look at this. So I'm just looking through some of this documentation now. Da, 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 da. So right now I have it set to full, which is only single player. So I think what I'm going to do is set it to mixed, where gameplay effects are only replicated to the owning client, only gameplay tags and gameplay keys are replicated to everybody. Yeah. So we're going to try mix for now. I'll definitely need to read more about the replication mode. But again, since this project started out as single player, I was set on doing full mode before. So note, mixed replication mode expects the owner actor's owner to be the controller. Player state's owner is the controller by default, but characters, if using mixed replication mode with the owner actor not the player state, then you need to call set owner. Okay, so in my case, my owner of my ability system component is my player state. So we satisfy this. Let's just check this out. Simply constructed in the owner actor's constructor and explicitly marked replicated. Which we do here. So we create the default subobject here. We set the replication to true, and then we went ahead and set it to mixed. All right. For player control characters, there's AC lives in play. Typically initialize the servers on possessed by function. So in this case, I'm curious if, and this is what I need to look up. I think some of these things are happening on both the client and the server, which we're not going to want. We need to enforce that the stuff is being created and owned on the server. But let's restart this and see if that warning changes. I need to look up like the life cycle of these things on. Yeah, this is interesting. All right. Play. I need to look up local predicted ability default GA Earth when not local, not activate. All right. I'm gonna look this up. This might be where I pause for today, so I can kind of do some research and come back with a better plan. I wonder if this still works in single player mode. Yeah. Yeah. So I had all this set up. Yeah, no problem. Definitely would come back. I'll be back. I'm leaving for work tomorrow. But I'll definitely be back live streaming next week, and I can hopefully have some more information on how to get all this working, and we can pick up from there. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, please let me know. Y'all have a good day.